Okay. Letting people in. This is the MDRC information session. We're just getting some people on. My name is Suzanne Grossman. I work at Baruch College and the Marxe School of Public and International Affairs. I'm here with my colleague Marnie Smith from Baruch College. She's waving right now. We're very happy to have MDRC here with us today. We have been doing this series all last week and into part of this week. I'm going to put in the chat box the list of other events we have coming up, so you can see it if you're not already aware. Okay. And we're just going to get started as more people are joining us with a brief poll. So I'm going to launch the poll. If you could fill that out. Should be able to see that on your screen now. We're just trying to find out who's here with us today. A lot of grad students, which is what we expected.
Rob is here.
Okay.
Although he says Sarah, it says Sarah Jane.
Okay.
Hi. Yep, Rob is here. He's in the blue sweater with the library looking background behind him, waving.
Hello.
Hey, great.
He's unmuted now.
Yeah. And Rob, you're welcome to rename yourself. There's a way to do it if you go under participants, but no worries if not. All right, I'm going to end the poll and show you the results. Do you see the results, Marnie?
No, you could just tell us.
Oh, okay. So we have 83% of the attendees today are graduate students. 13% are alumni of graduate programs. And we have a handful of undergraduate students with us, 2, according to the poll. The majority, 45%, are in an MPA or MPP program. We have the next largest in an MS or MA program. And then a handful in some of the other degrees. MBA, 9% are in our Masters of International Affairs program, and again, a couple of undergraduates. So thank you for that. And at this point, I want to turn it over to our colleagues at MDRC, starting with Sarah Jane David, who is the Assistant Director of Human Resources at MDRC. And I'll let you take it away, Sarah.
Sure. Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, Marnie. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks for joining us today. And we're really looking forward to share a little bit about MDRC. Normally when we do these, it's a slightly smaller group. And so I want to preface with, because we are larger, as much as we would love to do around robin, it's probably best that we kind of stay muted and get through an opportunity for you to hear from some of our amazing staff members, who I'm going to introduce in a little bit. As Suzanne mentioned, you guys are already muted, and in a little while when it's time for Q&A, please feel free to use the chat box. Hopefully most of you are very familiar with utilizing it. We'll be tallying and taking note of any questions that come our way. We will do our best to answer them within the time frame that we have, but rest assured, if you have any lingering questions that don't get addressed, we'll be happy to share our contact information and get back to you all. At the same token, I know many of you have your videos on and some don't. Really, this is your preference. Typically, we encourage having video on, but knowing that there's just so many of us today, it might not be the best option. So feel free to turn it off. And trust me, there's a lot of extra grace these days. We know everyone's home, so everyone's background is different, and I know you might have some extra people at home too. So having said that, I will preface with myself as Marnie and Suzanne mentioned, I'm the Assistant Director of HR at MDRC. I've been there for a little over 2.5 years now. It's been an amazing experience working with really talented, skillful, and very knowledgeable folks in the world of public and social policy. Two of them are here with us today, along with our recruitment staff, Servina Cortez and Amy Cruz. They're out there and you can see them. Feel free to wave. And we have two of our senior folks on staff from different areas, different backgrounds, who are going to take a few minutes to share with you a little bit about themselves. One of them is Robert Ivory. You might see him as Rob Ivory there. He's waving over there. I see Rob. He is our former Senior Vice President of Development and External Affairs. I will let him fill you in on that area. And although Rob is currently formally retired as a staff member of MDRC, he is informally really never have left. He's consulting with us right now and has been an amazing brand ambassador, and he's a world of information. And I'm going to pass it along to Rob first before we pass it on to Shelley Rappaport, who's one of our senior associates in our K through 12 area. It's one of our educational policy areas, and she'll fill you in on that as well. Rob, I know you are sharing some limited time with us, so we're going to throw it to you first. And after we hear from you and Shelley, we have a little video that we'd like to share with all of our students and staff that are stopping in. They'll hopefully kind of bring everything full circle. So Rob, I'm going to pass the baton to you and let you take it from here.
Great, thank you very much. And it's great to have everybody join this call. I hope everybody's coping as best you can with the horrific situation that we're all in. But it's also great to think about the future at the same time, because the world will get better and job opportunities will emerge, and maybe some of them at MDRC that some of you can pursue. So I'm kind of an ambassador at large for MDRC. I was at MDRC for 38 years, believe it or not, as the Senior VP for Development and External Affairs. And what that means is that I was involved in both the incubation and development of new projects at MDRC and helping to get them funded. And then on the back end, managing our dissemination and communication so that the research lessons and evidence that emerged would have some influence on public policy and on practice in the field. So I'm not a researcher, so Shelley's a researcher, so that will be a nice compliment to what I'm going to be saying. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview of MDRC, given the long history I've had with the organization. And I'll focus a lot on what makes MDRC different from a lot of other research organizations, kind of some of our distinctive qualities. First of all, we work in virtually every area of education and social policy except medical health. So we have 5 policy areas that's really straddle the full range of possibilities in education and social policy. A policy area that focuses on K-12, another on post-secondary education, mostly community colleges, a third that focuses on low-wage workers and communities, a fourth that focuses on families and children, early childhood development, as well as families. And then a last one, which I often refer to as potpourri, that covers all the vulnerable populations that the other policy areas don't include, including people with disabilities, criminal justice system, youth at risk, et cetera, et cetera. About 60% of our projects come about because we apply for federal grants and contracts and we happen to win them. And the other 40% or so are homegrown projects that we develop, where we develop the idea, often in partnership with other organizations. It could be school districts, it could be community colleges, it could be nonprofits. We develop the ideas with them and then raise the money to make them happen in different communities around the country, and then evaluate them to see if they're effective. So we often refer to those as our homegrown projects. So that makes us somewhat different than a lot of research organizations that are basically doing evaluations of programs that are designed by other people. We actually have a hand in designing, roughly 40% of the projects that we are involved in. Another thing that makes us different is that about 25% of our staff are not researchers. They're people who we've hired from the field. They've run nonprofits, they've worked in government, they've been teachers in school districts. Shelley was a former teacher. They've had some kind of operational experience, and they function as both the technical assistance arm of MDRC in getting our projects launched. They often function as the kind of the honest broker between our research staff and the program. They're kind of the liaisons to the programs that are in our studies. And one of a common term that's often used by programs that we work with in evaluations is when you work with MDRC, you build a strong relationship. It doesn't feel like an evaluation where like an auditor comes in, swoops down and does a study and then tells you what the results are. The organizations that we partner with are part of the process all along the way, so that we try to avoid any surprises and that they're really engaged from the very onset of the project to make sure that they are on board with whatever we're either, if it's a new intervention that we're bringing to them or whether it's an evaluation of something they're currently doing. So we have this notion that we no surprises, build relationships. And another distinctive quality is the emphasis we place on dissemination. And the people who are at MDRC are there not because they just believe in doing research, they believe in doing research with a purpose, so that the evidence that comes out of our work, we really do everything we can to leverage that evidence so that policy, whether it's federal policy or state policy, is informed, if not influenced by the evidence, and that practice is improved in the field. So we use every kind of dissemination tool possible to get the word out. And it's not that we're just also doing a lot of one-off projects. We try to do a family of projects that are all dealing with a similar issue, so that you look at the cumulative effect of all the evidence around that topic to try to advance the field, not just any particular one thing. So another common theme is that one project builds on another project, and you end up with a cumulative knowledge about a field, whether it's professional development in K-12 or it's providing enhanced supports in community colleges. We know a lot about how to do that well. That can both inform policy and practice. The final thing I would just say in way of introduction, and this is a lot, but since I only had about 15 minutes, I wanted to get it all out, is that I was there 38 years, and that may be unusual, but the average length of stay at MDRC is probably somewhere around 15 years. When you take out the research assistants who come in as undergrads and often come for 3 or 4 years before most of them decide to go to grad school. For the other staff that come on board, they stay for a long time. And part of the reason is the diversification of our work, the ability of staff to work on multiple projects, not just one project. The fact that even though we have 5 policy areas, we look at connecting strands across the policy areas so that the work is not done in, these are not islands, that there's a lot of interconnectedness, and that the work culture is very supportive, that people have voices that are heard when they come on staff, that there's a lot of mutual respect among colleagues. It's not a backbiting environment at all. There's a lot of mutual respect and collegiality. And I think work culture is often underestimated when people look for jobs. They're thinking about what is the job, but not necessarily what's the culture like where they're going to be working. And when you think about spending 8 or 10 hours a day, in your work career, the work environment should matter a lot in making choices. And just on the side, as you consider jobs, you should really focus as much on the work culture as the job, regardless of whether it's MDRC or elsewhere. The last thing I'll just say is, I actually did work before MDRC. I directed youth programs for the city of Baltimore for 8 years. And so I'm an example of the kind of person who joined MDRC from more of an operational program experience lens than somebody who came in as a researcher. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Shelley, unless Sarah Jane, you want to say anything in the interim.
No, that's great, Rob. Before you go, we do have a question that came up from what you've shared thus far, so I thought I'd put it out there. This is from Leslie. Do you partner with projects from the mayor's office, for instance, criminal justice reform or gun control?
Oh, hold on a second. I have to unmute you again.
Rob, we can't hear you. Hold on.
Just a second, please. Okay.
Still not.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So generally, we partner a lot with city government, with state government, with nonprofits. As a whole, you'll see in the video a whole portfolio of work we're developing with nonprofits across many domains. We do a lot of work with New York City. We have historically over the years. It's, we care deeply about the city, and since we're most of us are physically located here, we do a lot, and we've done a lot of work with with the criminal justice system. We did a major project at Rikers Island. We did a prisoner reentry program with a nonprofit called Center for Employment Opportunities. We have not done work on gun control. So so on that part of it, the answer is no. On the other parts of it, it's yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. And then and I see a few questions coming in. Don't worry, we're going to get to them. But specific to Rob, we have Angela, who's very interested in the external affairs side of public policy and research, and had a question about what your thoughts might be specific to more so, I guess, that external affairs on communications, PR, marketing, things of that nature, which we can speak to a little bit as well too. But from your experience, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
So so we spend a lot of time building relationships in DC, not just with government officials, but also with the major advocacy groups across the political spectrum, not just the left-leaning organizations. We try to involve organizations across the spectrum to make sure that the evidence gets in their hands. And so we focus a lot on who the influencers are in policy, not just the direct policymakers like congressional staff. So we work with advocacy organizations. We also work a lot with membership organizations, like the organizations that represent governors, or the organizations that represent community colleges, or the organizations that represent state legislatures, because we need efficient ways to get the information out. And rather than us trying to reach 16,000 school districts, we can work with the membership organizations that represent school districts and get information out through them and their members. So, but we also have developed strong relationships with the career staff at federal agencies who are going to be there through various political transitions. We developed strong relationships with the Office of Management and Budget, which plays a really important, influential role around the federal budget. And then the congressional support groups like Congressional Budget Office, Congressional Research Services. And then I guess in recent years, we've with certain states where we're doing a lot of work in, we've also built relationships with state leadership as well, in addition to the feds.
Thanks for the overview, Rob. I hope that was helpful. And so now I want to take just a second to transfer over to Shelley. And Shelley, I see a question or two that's come up that probably you're going to respond and answer to. So maybe if you don't mind providing us a little bit of an overview about your role and your experience at MDRC thus far to kick us off.
Great. So welcome everyone, and I'm happy to be here. I know these are really strange times. Rob told you a bit about me. Before I came to MDRC, I was a teacher for 11 years. I taught mostly bilingual education in the lower grades in LA and in New York City, and 1 year in Hoboken at a charter school. And then I decided that I really wanted to do policy, so I went to NYU to the Wagner School, and so I'm a little bit of both. I came in with some research, but a lot of kind of in the field experience. So that's where I was before. I actually, after teaching, I was at the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund, and I studied bilingual education there. And that's when I thought, this would be even better if I knew what I was doing. And that's when I went to NYU. And then I worked for the Hispanic Federation for about a year. And that's because I grew up in Puerto Rico, so I have a very big interest in Latin affairs. So my role at MDRC, and I'm exactly at where Rob said. I've been there 15 years, so I'm right there at the average. And my role is in the K-12 department, and I am a qualitative researcher mostly, but I also do some operations work, and I'll tell you what that is. So the main thing I do is I guess you'd call it implementation research. And what it is that we do a lot of big studies where we use a lot of the time random control trials, which means that we kind of do like a lottery, and half of the programs get some intervention that is provided to them, and the other half serves as a control group. But often, you know, you get these weird results, and sometimes it's because the people who are supposed to be implementing a program maybe don't implement it as well as we think that they could, or they're just different challenges that come up. And so the implementation researchers are partly there to kind of figure out, well, what's the story? What's really going on? Is it that this program didn't work because it just doesn't work, or is it because it was never implemented as is? And so what I do for that is I do a lot of, I develop interview protocols and focus group protocols, and then I go out and I conduct the interviews and focus groups. I do things like, what was I gonna say? I develop surveys, and we figure out ways to get the surveys to people. Right now we use technology a lot, and so that a lot of teachers that we're surveying can answer with their phones. And then there's the analysis that happens. So once we get back all the data, we look for patterns in what we see. And then of course there's the writing. And so one thing I just want to say, I don't know if Rob is still there, but before he leaves, so right now I'm in the middle of writing a report, and so Rob is one of the reviewers, and he just sent all this feedback today, which was really helpful. And the other thing I want to say about Rob is to tell you a little bit about MDRC culture is that we have a mentor-mentee program, and I've often been a mentor, but this year I thought it'd be really helpful to have someone be a mentor to me, and so I got matched up with Rob, and so and that's been really great to have him as a mentor. As you can see, he's a wealth of knowledge. So that's one of the things MDRC has. So anyway, getting back to what I do on the operations side, I do a lot of things like recruitment of, in my case, it's usually school districts and schools, and so that means kind of explaining what the program, what the study is to them, telling them what the benefits might be of them participating, what maybe some of the downsides are of them participating. I travel to those places. I then work closely with the liaisons there so that, like Rob said, there are no surprises. There's always someone that they can go to about, what do we do in this case? What if we can't get enough teachers recruited? What are the messages we should send? What's the information we should send to parents? These are things that I'm working closely with the people on the ground with. It does involve sometimes cold calling school districts, which is not my favorite thing, but I do it. And anyway, and it's nice for someone like me to be able to do that, because I was in school districts for so long. I sort of have this lingo that makes people kind of more at ease talking to me, and so that leads to some success in recruitment. What else? So my day to day right now, of course, is sitting here at my desk at my house. But normally what I do, I work in the New York office. We have a few different offices, but it's a real mix of meeting with my team. Right now it's doing a lot of writing, but when I meet with my team, we do things like kind of together develop our different protocols. We talk about patterns we're seeing in our data. There's, I meet with my mentor. I'm on a qualitative research group, and so we talk about different methods in order to improve our qualitative methods. I was once on a diversity council, I'm not now, but so we meet with the diversity council to think of different ways that we can make both the culture at MDRC more diverse, make our staff more diverse, think about ways to bring in equity into our research. What else do I do? I sometimes walk around and talk to different people just because it's kind of a friendly place. And we have lunch forums sometimes I go to where you can learn a lot about different areas of work that's going on at MDRC. I would say that almost everything I know about research, I actually learned on the job. There's a lot of professional development as well. I don't know, I guess I'll leave it at that. I don't know, is there anything else that would be helpful for me to share, Servina or Sarah?
No, I think that's an awesome, great start. And I definitely want to go back to the mentoring part, which I think Servina can probably tack on too. But you actually have a question, and I don't want to lose it before we scroll down further with additional questions. Erica had a question about what your thoughts might be for Teach for America. And I had just asked if she can expand on that. I'm not quite sure if she means in terms of their overall mission and them as an organization, or if it's more project work. But I don't know if you have general thoughts about TFA.
Well, so does it say somewhere that my main project is with TFA?
She saw that you did a study on it.
Okay, so I'm doing my second study of TFA. And so when I said that I've been doing a lot of writing and that Rob is a reviewer, it's about TFA. What I can tell you is that we're not evaluating TFA to see if TFA is good or bad, but more about different programs that they're trying to improve what they do within TFA. And so what we're studying is the programs that they're putting in place to see if those programs are the way that they should go in the future. In terms of, I'm not sure if the question is really about my opinion about TFA, or because TFA is, people have really strong opinions about it. How can I best answer this? I'm not sure exactly what you want to know. I know a lot about TFA, so
I'll let Erica expand on that a little bit further, maybe on some questions, but it seems like it's just your overall thoughts while doing your research.
Okay.
So it could be opinion.
Is Erica there?
Yeah, she just put a question on the chat box.
Oh, I see. Okay. Let me look.
And then as you,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so my overall thoughts while doing the research and my personal opinion. Okay, so my overall thoughts is, so TFA is, they're really, really into learning and doing things in the best way possible. So they're constantly looking to see what's out there that will improve what they do. And so, which is great, but it also, has presented a bit of a challenge in doing the research, because one of the things that we've learned is that they're very interested in grabbing kind of new methods, for instance, of doing professional development and implementing them right away, because they want everyone to have the benefit of this thing. And so one of the challenges has been that evaluating something that is really new, that hasn't been tried before, is difficult, because no one has implemented it before. We're not really evaluating whether the program kind of works. We're evaluating all sorts of things, like what are the challenges of even getting it up and started, and what are the challenges of bringing everybody on board. And so it's presented a bit of a challenge because it's a moving target, and sometimes the program isn't even that developed as we're evaluating it. And so one of the things that we've been thinking about is how to use more rapid cycle research to look at programs like TFA's program. And so I don't know how helpful that is, but that's an important thing to know about TFA, is that they're constantly trying to do the thing that works best. They also have prioritized equity as something that's really, really important. And I don't know if you know, but TFA isn't necessarily about getting teachers into the field long term, but it's more about changing policy through getting people to be teachers for 2 years so that they get to know kind of what the situation is in our poor schools, and then going on to be lawyers or politicians or something else where they can have more influence. So the idea isn't so much for TFA to keep teachers long term. It's more about getting people who have positions of power where they can really advocate for general education. And I didn't know that going in, but I do now. And so a lot of the work that they do is also around leadership. And then I'm sure you know that there are very strong opinions about TFA. You know, some of them that it's really just about putting inexperienced teachers into the field, and just as they're getting good, they go off and do something else. So there are a lot of people who have strong feelings about TFA. And, you know, based on what I just said, that their goal isn't to keep people in the field necessarily. You could see why people would think that. On the other hand, they are doing really their best to make sure that the people who are in the field really are working from an equity lens and getting the best possible professional development they can. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Shelley. That's really helpful. So, and hopefully that helps for Erica, who had a question about TFA. So we are getting quite a few questions that are recruitment focused, and we will certainly get to that. I kind of have one last question that I want to pose to you, Shelley, which kind of will bridge into the recruitment side. Is, can you tell us a little bit about your experience prior to MDRC, maybe kind of the roads that led you to the work that you do now, whether you were research focused even then? Did you always know, was it like a typical, did you do a degree focused area that was specific to public policy, or were you kind of out of the mix and didn't even realize an organization like MDRC existed? And then we'll piggyback off of that in terms of our openings now, a little bit about what that looks like in the current landscape that we're in, but also as a whole.
Okay, so so I was a teacher for 11 years, but I did do a lot of things during that time that were beyond teaching. So for instance, one of the last school that I worked at was in Brooklyn, and what I did there, it's in East New York, and along with the person who's now the principal there, we were both first grade teachers. We started a dual language program there. We started it in K1, but now it goes through 8th grade. And so when I was teaching, I was always trying to do these, you know, more leadership kinds of things. I also did, I'm national board certified. I don't know if that means anything to anyone, but it's a certification that only about 50% of people who try get, and it's to be kind of a master teacher, and it allows you to more easily work in different states. And then a few years, and I went through an alternative certification program in Los Angeles Unified School District. And then a few years after that, I started teaching in that program. And so I've trained a lot of teachers over the years. And then leading up to kind of the end of my teaching career, I was also on one of they're not called school boards anymore, or they weren't then. I was for District 2 in Manhattan. I was on the education panel. I was appointed to the panel, even though I didn't have children then, by the Manhattan Borough President, because I lived in Manhattan at the time. And I'd been doing a lot of work on bilingual education. And so I was on that. I was also on the New York State certification panel, working to kind of on policies for teacher certification, and also things like, you know, teachers who were going to get their certification revoked, and what are the things we need teachers in New York to be doing. So I did kind of a mix of things. And then, of course, I worked at the Puerto Rican Legal Defense, and I specifically worked on bilingual education. I was looking to see whether the bilingual education policies in New York City public schools were benefiting students. And then I got this idea, well, hey, this is really fun. I think I'd like to do more policy work, and that's when I applied to NYU. And then while I was still at NYU, almost done, I applied to MDRC. So I've done a mix of things, but all within education.
Thank you. Thanks, Shelley. That was super helpful. And it definitely speaks to what Rob had mentioned earlier, that we definitely hire from various backgrounds, degrees. Some are more clear-cut than others. But Servina or Nailene, maybe you want to jump in and share a little bit about when we do recruitment from a staffing perspective. What are some key things that we look for either in a resume, in an application, or when we meet someone and screen them for the first time?
Let me just add that I have an MPA, so that's what I did at NYU, with kind of not a major, but a focus on public policy. So that was part of it.
That definitely helps. And I think we have a few NYU students here too, so you've got an alumni on hand. Serena, anything you want to add, or Nailene?
Yeah, hi everyone, how are you? Nice to see some familiar faces out there. Hi Danielle, hi Jonathan, hi Sam. Yeah, so I mean at the master's level, so just to give you an overview of how we hire at MDRC. So typically someone coming in at the undergrad level typically comes in at the assistant level. So you can come in as a research assistant, both on the qualitative side or the quantitative side, and even the operation side. Typically qualitative and operations RAs are coming in as just research assistants. And if you're someone who is more on the data side, you're coming in as a technical assistant. And then at the master's level, you're coming in typically at the analyst level. So that's what you're going to look for if you are, of course, looking for open opportunities with us. But yeah, I mean, we don't look for, I mean, it's nice that if someone does have some type of research background, we will totally consider that, but you don't need to necessarily have like a ton of research experience. We look for a lot of like project management skills, people that can manage up, although you do have a team that you work with, depending on the projects that you're hired for. We definitely look for someone who can do the work on their own if needed, especially at the analyst level. So someone that can, you know, take initiative and take charge and, you know, move forward on the project that you're hired for. So you don't need to have a ton of research experience, a passion for social policy, Of course, that's a number one to us. I think that's a pet peeve, according to the hiring managers that I work with. I think when I started at MDRC, I found it very refreshing how everyone had this weirdly passionate drive about the work that we do and the things that we work on. So I think that alone makes someone stand out, but you don't need to have, you know, a ton of research experience. I saw a question come up from, I forget who the name is, but I saw a question about social work backgrounds. So we have recently hired folks who do have that type of background. Recently, we've hired social work folks as resource managers. And that role specifically is like a liaison between our pred focus areas, so our policy areas, and then our finance team. So we do look at folks, you know, that come from all different backgrounds, as Sarah and Shelley mentioned, our people who are extremely diverse and come from all different type of backgrounds. So yeah, so that's what we typically look for.
Thanks, Servina.
Yeah.
And a throwback question to you or Shelley, from Shelley's experience too, at the associate level, what typically does that look like in terms of years of experience and or education?
Well, so as I mentioned, I almost was finished with my MPA when I began at MDRC, but I didn't mention before, I also have a previous master's to be a principal. So it's a master's in education administration. And like I said, I had a lot of relevant experience, and I also speak Spanish. And so I think part of the reason that I was able to get a job at MDRC was because I had all this kind of in the field experience, both teaching, but also teaching teachers and being on different panels. It just, you know, I've just been in very many different situations having to do with education.
And I think Servina can speak to typically what the difference might be. Do you need a PhD if you're internal for growth? And if we're hiring externally, typically what do we look for at the associate level?
Yep. So typically, I mean, someone coming in with a master's can come in at the associate level with like a certain amount of relevant years of experience. You don't necessarily need to have a PhD. But of course, that's always a great thing as well. Internally, you are able to move up, of course, for professional development wise, from, you know, assistant to analyst level, analyst to associate level. We do have some folks who have had those paths, but typically research assistants go off to grad school, come back at the, you know, analyst level, or, you know, stay with us throughout their graduate programs and then just come back full time. So that's, of course, we have a lot of that, but you don't necessarily need to have a PhD to come in at the associate level. Hopefully that answers the questions.
Yeah, I think it does. And Krista responded to everyone with her own experience. Thanks for sharing that. But yes, currently in the landscape of COVID-19, we do have open positions. As of now, we are taking applications, but most likely taking just a short and long-term overview, not knowing how long we'll be working remote. We're being mindful about work allocation and also the onboarding experience for anyone we potentially may want to bring on board. And so we're taking a pause on actual hiring, but we're making sure that we want to build a pipeline and get to know our applicants. We also understand that those who will be looking for employment after graduation are looking now. And so we are mindful of that. And so please don't hesitate to apply or to connect with us, keep in touch. We really encourage that, and I think it's really helpful. We didn't have anyone today to speak specifically about the analyst role. We're certainly happy to provide more information about that, as well as the RA positions, which some of you may be interested in, but since most of you are graduate level, the analyst level and above in terms of positions. I just wanted to do a quick time check with Suzanne and Marnie in terms of where we are. Can we field a few more questions, or do we?
Of course.
Okay, awesome. So I think there was a question specific to international students, and so we're being mindful about that too. And Servina and Aileen, who typically are on the forefront of our application process and screening. I don't know if either one of you want to touch that.
Nailene on? Sorry, I can't see her.
She's muted. Naileen's
I
on.
had unmuted her a second ago, but I think she remuted herself. Okay, trying again. She should be unmuted.
I am muted. Hello guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So for the international students, so we do hire international students, but with like a little asterisk on the corner, because so we currently do consider sponsoring on a PhD level, but for like our internships and some time limited role are also like available. So I would always say feel free, and it all depends on the project base. For some of the policy areas project, that depends on like the time limited specifics on that. Serena, am I missing anything?
For internships, we hired anyone and everyone. So
Yeah.
Just because it's only an 8-week experience for the at the master's level, the undergrad level, and at the fellowship level. So we take everyone for that, but just piggybacking off of Nalene's comment, it's basically up to the area. To be totally honest, MDRC's policy is only we consider sponsoring at the PhD level. But if the team is like totally into you and wants to hire you and can't live without you, they will make an exception and offer you like a time limited, agreement, and just, have you join the team for the, the full length of your employment work authorization. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that, guys. And we have a question about some of the softwares that we use in-house. And I don't know if Shelley, you want to speak to this from your experience, either directly or indirectly working with some of our tech folks. Are there any qualitative specific softwares? And maybe we can speak to some of the training that we do in-house too, Servina, in terms of R and the RTU unit. But Shelley, I don't know if you have anything you want to say on that.
So when I first came to MDRC, we were using In Vivo. And then I'd say now, like maybe, I'm totally guessing here, but about 7 years ago, we moved to something called Deduce, which is very intuitive. And there's been training at MDRC at all kinds of levels in terms of how to kind of set up the Deduce project, which is something I actually cannot do. Our research assistants usually do that. But then there have been some trainings on how to actually then use it for analysis at various levels. So one kind of in, how do you just start doing it? And then some other trainings on how to do specific things to kind of improve the kind of analyses you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
I also saw a question from, I believe it's Brandy. I am wondering if MDRC also has positions relevant to data analytics and BI, and it looks like you have experience in Tableau. So on the quantitative side, we provide training to all of our staff, especially at the undergrad level. So we have an internal team called the RTU team, which stands for Research Technology Unit, and they typically host all of our internal trainings around like quantitative work and how we do things at MDRC. MDRC's primary language has been SAS for the past 40 plus years, but we also have a Center for Data Insights that's working around like R and SPSS and Stata to see what works best. Of course, we all know SAS is the cheapest, so this is why I think MDRC has been using it for so long. But yes, we do provide training to all of our new hires. In addition to the SAS trainings that we provide like report production trainings. We provide like Excel refreshers and any trainings that we throw at our RTU team that we think we could benefit from. In addition to the trainings that we encourage folks to take outside of MDRC as well, just so that you guys are aware. As far as hiring someone who has a background in Tableau, that's, you know, totally fine. We don't necessarily look for you to have the expertise in the software that we use, but if you do have some type of knowledge around, you know, the quantitative side and how it works and softwares, you will catch on extremely fast to the softwares that we use.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Shelley or Servina or Naleen, where are folks who have a social work background or are pursuing a degree in social work, do they have a place in MDRC? You know, what might that look like?
And I can guess. For sure, on the operations side, someone with a social work degree would be really helpful, because a lot of what we do is these big studies, but you can't just do a study without setting it up. And a lot of setting it up is kind of working with people in the field to recruit, to explain the study, to make sure that people at MDRC understand the kind of work that's going on in the field. And so having someone who has been in the field doing that kind of work, I know we have a lot of studies, not in my department, but, you know, like visiting nurse service or visiting counselor service. Like, these are all things that someone who has background in social work can really be helpful with, and say, you know, because if you're just a researcher and you say, well, we're going to study this, someone who's been in the field will say, well, that's not how things actually work. And so it really helps to have people who can say things like, well, you know, if that's how you're going to go about it, you know, you'd be better off doing it this way or that way. And so it's really helpful to have people who actually know the field.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And we have just a reminder, an overall question about internships. I'm going to leave Servina and Naleen to that. And I'll reshare the link. There's a link in the chat box about our internship programs, but Servina, maybe you want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do an internship at the undergrad and graduate level every single summer. And then we also have a doctoral fellowship that is currently open. Jonathan DeLu, I think I pronounced your name correctly. So please feel free to check out the website and apply if you have an interest. But unfortunately, at the undergrad level and the graduate level, we are at final stages right now for as we're interviewing applicants and making final decisions. We typically post it early on, so we had it up in January for a couple of weeks, and you know, we're actually almost at the stages of, you know, offering the role to those selected individuals. But we do it every single summer. So at the undergrad level, we do it for rising seniors, so you do have to be in your junior year. At the graduate level, we do it for anyone, you know, in a graduate program, and then anyone at the doctoral level working on their dissertation. So, and Sarah has provided a link to the actual page on our website that gives you a little bit more information about it.
And Maria had a question specific to if HR conducts research itself, which alludes to another question, and I can't remember who had asked it, but how projects are assigned. So I want to throw that latter question to Shelley. You might have a better perspective on that. But to Maria's question, we absolutely have roles for IO psychology majors. We love that. I actually am an IO psychology major and org behavioral degree in my master's degree is in org behavior. So that's specific to HR and that function. But on our policy and research side, we also are very interested in IO psychology. I think it lends a hand very well. And in terms of how projects are assigned, someone had asked, can we create our own projects? So I kind of want to allude that to Shelley a little bit from your perspective in terms of how we get our projects. I think Rob talked about in terms of funding and partnerships, but then how are they really kind of distributed?
Well, I can talk about how it is in K-12. Different people have different interests, and I'm not saying that you're always going to get a project that's exactly what you're interested in. But we have several stages, and the first stage is kind of a proposal stage where we write a proposal to see if we actually win the project. And so the things that are considered and who's going to write that proposal or who's going to be named in the proposal to work on that project has a lot to do with interest. You know, someone's going to come up and say, hey, we're thinking of putting you on this project. What do you think? There are times you might say, yeah, I don't really want to do that. But for the most part, it's about kind of trying to find the best match. So, but then other times, I'm not going to say that it's very typical to come up with your own project, but there are times where you hear of something that might be happening, and you might go to your supervisor or to the head of the department and say, hey, this is something that's happening. I'm really interested in it. I happen to be really, really interested in teacher development, especially new teacher development. And so when the TFA proposal came out, I said, you know, I've worked on a lot of projects. I'm really interested in this. And if we win this, I'd really like to be the director of it, which I'd never been before. And so we applied and we did win it, and I got to be the director. So it was a way for me to really grow in my profession. And as Rob said before, we don't just kind of apply to different studies that come out, whatever they are. We really try to specialize in different areas. And so different people in the department have really grown into some kind of specialty. And so it may be that something you're really interested in is something that we often go for. So things that we have done is a lot of teacher professional development. We've done a lot in kind of career academies or teaching high school students kind of both career and academics. We're starting to do a lot of work on equity. And I'm trying to like blanking, but on social emotional development as well. And so those are some areas that, you know, you can say, hey, I'm really interested in this and I'd like to do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelly. I think that's super helpful. I'm doing a time check and we have 2 minutes left about. We have a video we wanted to share, but given the time constraints, maybe I'll just share the link on the chat, but I'll ask Suzanne and Marnie what you think.
How long is the video?
It's 4.5 minutes.
Maybe we'll just, yeah, why don't we, you can share the link on the chat, and then I'll also include the link on the follow-up email to everybody who's attending today. And we have so they can watch it kind of at their leisure.
Sure. I think it's just helpful. It might provide you additional context if you have more questions. I shared a generic email that actually Servina, Nailene, and myself have access to. So if you have additional questions that wasn't answered, we're happy to field them to Shelly or Rob or anyone else in the organization that it might be more targeted to, and we'll get back to you. But it was really great spending some time with you. Thank you so much, Shelly, Servina, and Nailene, for joining too. And if anyone has future questions, we look forward to hearing them.
Thank you so much to all the staff at MDRC for spending time with us today. It was incredibly informative and we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Be safe.
No problem. Bye, everyone. Stay
Bye.
safe.